On a winter morning in 2007 in the high desert country of New Mexico, a young woman named Kimberly Trujillo walked out of her apartment and vanished without a trace. She was 23 years old. She was a mother. She had told her family she would call them later that day. The call never came. Her car was found abandoned on a remote stretch of highway, keys still in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, no body. For years, her disappearance remained a mystery that haunted the windswept plains and adobe homes of Valencia County. But sometimes the truth doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it rises up through the cracks in a carefully constructed story, brought to light by the passage of time and the courage of those who refuse to forget. What really happened to Kimberly Trujillo on that cold February morning? And why did it take nearly 15 years for the answer to finally emerge? Valencia County sits in the heart of New Mexico, a landscape of high desert plateau where the earth stretches vast and unforgiving beneath an endless sky. The towns here are small and scattered, connected by long ribbons of highway that cut through miles of scrubland dotted with juniper and piñon. In winter, the wind comes down from the mountains with a bite that goes straight through your clothes. The sky turns pale and hard. The ground freezes at night and thaws by midday, leaving the dirt roads slick with mud. Belén, the largest town in Valencia County, has a population of just over 7,000 people. It's a railroad town, built along the tracks of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway. The trains still come through, their whistles echoing across the valley in the early morning hours. Most people here work in Albuquerque, making the 30-mile commute north on Interstate 25. Others work the land, raising cattle or growing chili in the fertile bottomland along the Rio Grande. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where news travels fast and secrets are hard to keep. Kimberly Trujillo grew up in Los Lunas, just north of Belén. She was the second of 4 children, raised by her mother Rosa and her stepfather Miguel in a modest home on the west side of town. Those who knew her said she was quiet but strong-willed, the kind of young woman who worked hard and kept her troubles to herself. She had graduated from Los Lunas High School in 2002 and had been working as a cashier at a grocery store in Belén. She had a daughter, Isabella, who was 2 years old in February of 2007. The little girl had dark eyes like her mother and a smile that lit up the room. Kimberly lived with her boyfriend, Marcus Delgado, in a ground-floor apartment of a small complex on Camino del Llano, a quiet street on the eastern edge of Belén. The apartment was simple: 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a living room with worn carpet and walls painted beige. Outside their front door was a small concrete patio where Isabella's toys were scattered: a pink plastic tricycle, a bucket of chalk, a stuffed bear with one eye missing. The swing set in the shared courtyard creaked in the wind. Marcus was 26 years old. He worked as a mechanic at a tire shop on Main Street. He drove a 1998 Ford F-150, dark blue with rust along the wheel wells. Those who knew him said he was quiet, kept to himself, had a temper that could flare up quick but usually burned out just as fast. He and Kimberly had been together for 3 years. They weren't married, but they talked about it sometimes. They talked about a lot of things. February 14, 2007 was a Wednesday, Valentine's Day. The temperature that morning was 28 degrees. The sun rose at 7:03. Kimberly had the day off from work. She had planned to drive to Albuquerque to do some shopping, maybe buy something for Isabella. Marcus had gone to work early, leaving the apartment just after 6 in the morning. Kimberly's mother would later say that she had spoken to her daughter on the phone around 8:30 that morning. Kimberly sounded fine. Normal. She said she was getting Isabella dressed and that she would call later. She said she loved her mother. Those were the last words Rosa Trujillo heard from her daughter. At approximately 9:15 that morning, A neighbor in the apartment complex later recalled seeing Kimberly loading Isabella into her car, a silver 2004 Honda Civic. The neighbor waved. Kimberly waved back. The car pulled out of the parking lot and turned east onto Camino del Llano. That was the last confirmed sighting of Kimberly Trujillo alive. Clears throat. By nightfall, when Kimberly still had not called and was not answering her phone, Rosa Trujillo began to worry. She called Marcus. He said Kimberly had not come home. He said he didn't know where she was. He sounded worried too. Rosa called Kimberly's phone again and again. It went straight to voicemail. At 9:47 that evening, Rosa called the Valencia County Sheriff's Office to report her daughter missing. The next morning, February 15th, a rancher driving along State Road 47 approximately 12 miles south of Belen noticed a silver Honda Civic parked on the shoulder of the highway. The car was unlocked. The keys were in the ignition. The engine was cold. Inside, deputies found Kimberly's purse on the passenger seat, her wallet still inside with her driver's license and $43 in cash. Her cell phone was on the floor beneath the driver's seat, the battery dead. In the back seat was Isabella's car seat, empty. A pink blanket lay crumpled beside it. There was no sign of Kimberly. There was no sign of Isabella. The discovery sent a jolt of fear through the community. Deputies cordoned off the area and called in search teams. By midday, volunteers from Belen, Los Lunas, and surrounding towns began arriving. They came with ATVs and horses, with dogs and flashlights, with thermoses of coffee and grim determination. The search area covered miles of open desert, the terrain rough and treacherous. Arroyos cut deep into the earth. Abandoned cattle pens and crumbling adobe structures dotted the landscape. The wind blew constantly, kicking up dust that stung the eyes and coated everything in a fine layer of grit. Helicopters flew low overhead, their rotors thumping against the cold air. Ground teams walked in grids, calling out Kimberly's name, scanning the brush for any sign of disturbance. The search went on for 3 days. They found nothing. No footprints leading away from the car. No clothing. No body. It was as if Kimberly and Isabella had simply disappeared. Deputies began interviewing everyone who knew Kimberly, her family, her coworkers, her friends, and Marcus Delgado. He was cooperative, they said. He answered their questions. He said that Kimberly had left the apartment that morning to go shopping. He said she had taken Isabella with her. He said he had been at work all day. His boss confirmed this. Marcus had clocked in at 6:23 that morning and had clocked out at 4:15 in the afternoon. He had been there the whole time. Multiple coworkers saw him. But there were small things that didn't quite fit. Deputies noticed that Marcus seemed unusually calm. Not distraught, not frantic, just calm. When asked about his relationship with Kimberly, he said it was fine, normal, no problems, but Kimberly's family told a different story. They said there had been arguments. They said Marcus could be controlling, that he didn't like Kimberly going places without him. They said Kimberly had mentioned wanting to leave him, though she had never said it outright. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves. They reviewed the timeline again and again. The neighbor had seen Kimberly leave at 9:15. Her car was found 12 miles south on State Road 47. The drive would have taken maybe 15 minutes, but why would she have gone that way? There was nothing out there. No shopping. No reason to be on that road. And where was Isabella? On February 18th, 4 days after Kimberly disappeared, a call came into the sheriff's office. A woman who lived in Belen said she had seen a little girl matching Isabella's description at a park in town the previous afternoon. The girl had been with a man. The woman couldn't be sure, but the man looked like Marcus Delgado. Deputies went to the apartment. Marcus answered the door. Isabella was inside, sitting on the living room floor watching cartoons. She was unharmed. She was wearing pajamas and eating cereal from a plastic bowl. Marcus said he had picked Isabella up from a friend's house the day before. He said Kimberly had dropped the little girl off there before she disappeared. He said he didn't mention it earlier because he didn't think it was important. The friend confirmed the story. She said Kimberly had dropped Isabella off around 9:30 on the morning of February 14th and had said she would be back in a few hours. She never came back. For those who have ever felt the cold weight of doubt settle in your chest, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew, this was that moment for Rosa Trujillo. Her granddaughter was safe. That was the most important thing, but nothing else made sense. Why would Kimberly leave Isabella with a friend if she was just going shopping? Why would she drive south on State Road 47, away from Albuquerque? And why, if Marcus knew where Isabella was, had he not mentioned it immediately? The investigation continued, but with each passing day it grew colder. There was no body, no evidence of foul play, no witnesses who had seen anything suspicious. The media covered the story for a few weeks, then moved on. The volunteers went home. The search teams disbanded. Kimberly Trujillo's face appeared on missing person posters tacked to telephone poles and taped in store windows. Her family held vigils and prayer services. They begged anyone with information to come forward. But no one did. By the summer of 2007, the case had effectively gone cold. Deputies had no leads, no suspects. Marcus Delgado had stopped cooperating with investigators. He had hired a lawyer. He had moved out of the apartment on Camino del Llano and taken Isabella with him. Rosa Trujillo fought for custody of her granddaughter but lost. The court ruled that Marcus was Isabella's father and had done nothing wrong. There was no evidence linking him to Kimberly's disappearance. He was awarded full custody. The years passed slowly. The swing hung still in the courtyard of the apartment complex. The toy truck lay on its side in the dirt, half buried now, forgotten. Clear's throat. By 2010, 3 years had gone by. Marcus Delgado had moved to Albuquerque with Isabella. He had found work at another auto shop. He had started dating someone new. Isabella, now 5 years old, was enrolled in kindergarten. She was a quiet child. Her teachers said she was polite and well-behaved, though she sometimes seemed withdrawn. She drew pictures in class, houses with big windows, stick figures of people. Sometimes she drew a woman with long, dark hair standing alone in an empty field. Rosa Trujillo visited her granddaughter whenever she could, though Marcus made it difficult. He controlled when and where the visits happened. He was always present, always watching. Rosa would bring Isabella small gifts, tell her stories about her mother, show her photographs. Isabella listened but rarely spoke. Rosa would later say that she could see something in the little girl's eyes, something heavy and sad that no child should carry. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, someone you trusted, someone you thought you knew, you understand the quiet agony of waiting for the truth to surface. Rosa Trujillo lived in that agony every day. She knew in her bones that Marcus had something to do with Kimberly's disappearance. She couldn't prove it. She couldn't even say why she was so certain. It was just a feeling, a mother's intuition, a certainty that something terrible had happened and that the man raising her granddaughter knew what it was. In 2012, 5 years after Kimberly vanished, Marcus's relationship with his girlfriend ended. She moved out. Isabella was 7 years old now. Marcus had begun drinking more, neighbors would later say. He worked long hours and came home late. Isabella spent a lot of time alone or with babysitters. She had become even quieter. She had nightmares. She would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, calling for her mother. One afternoon in September of 2012, Isabella was at school when her teacher noticed bruises on her arm. Small, round marks like fingerprints. The teacher asked Isabella what happened. Isabella said she had fallen, but the teacher wasn't convinced. She reported it to Child Protective Services. A caseworker came to the school to interview Isabella. At first, the little girl said nothing. She stared at the floor. She twisted her hands in her lap. Then quietly, she began to speak. She said her father got angry sometimes. She said he grabbed her when she did something wrong. She said she tried to be good, but sometimes she forgot. The caseworker asked if her father had ever hurt her badly. Isabella shook her head. Then she said something that made the caseworker go very still. She said, "He hurt my mom." The caseworker asked what she meant. Isabella went quiet again. She wouldn't say more, but it was enough. The caseworker contacted the Valencia County Sheriff's Office. A detective named Laura Sandoval was assigned to follow up. Detective Sandoval had been with the department for 12 years. She had worked missing persons cases before. She remembered Kimberly Trujillo. On October 3, 2012, Detective Sandoval drove to Isabella's school and spoke with the little girl in a private room with a counselor present. She asked Isabella to tell her about her mother. Isabella said she didn't remember much. She was only 2 when her mother went away, but she remembered some things. She remembered her mother's voice. She remembered the apartment with the courtyard, and she remembered the day her mother left. Detective Sandoval asked Isabella what she remembered about that day. Isabella was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Daddy was mad, they were yelling, Mommy was crying." She said she remembered being in the car. She remembered her mother driving. She remembered stopping somewhere. She remembered her father being there. She said, "Daddy told me to close my eyes. He said it would be okay." When she opened her eyes, her mother was gone. Clears throat. Detective Sandoval wrote down every word. She knew that memories from such a young age were unreliable, that a child's recollection could be influenced by many things. But she also knew that children sometimes remembered details that adults overlooked. She asked Isabella if she remembered where they had stopped. Isabella shook her head. She said it was far away. She said there were no houses, just dirt and sky. Detective Sandoval reopened Kimberly Trujillo's missing person case. She reviewed all the old files, all the witness statements, all the evidence. She looked at the timeline again. Kimberly had left the apartment at 9:15. Her car was found 12 miles south on State Road 47. Marcus had been at work all day. His alibi was solid, but what if it wasn't? She went back to the tire shop where Marcus had worked in 2007. The business had changed hands, but the new owner still had old employment records. Detective Sandoval asked to see the time cards for February 14, 2007. Marcus had clocked in at 6:23 in the morning. He had clocked out for lunch at 11:58. He had clocked back in at 12:53. He had clocked out for the day at 4:15 in the afternoon. A standard lunch break. 55 minutes, plenty of time to drive somewhere and back. Detective Sandoval pulled out a map. From the tire shop to the location where Kimberly's car was found was approximately 18 miles, a 30-minute round trip. If Marcus had left at noon, he could have been there and back by 12:30 with time to spare. But why? And how would he have gotten back to work? He only had one vehicle, the blue Ford truck, unless someone had helped him, or unless he had used Kimberly's car. Detective Sandoval began interviewing people again. Former coworkers of Marcus, neighbors from the old apartment complex. She asked if anyone remembered seeing Marcus's truck around midday on February 14, 2007. No one did, but one former coworker, a man named Daniel Ortiz, said something interesting. He said that Marcus had seemed off that day, distracted. He had taken his lunch break and come back sweating even though it was cold outside. He had seemed nervous. When Daniel asked if he was okay, Marcus said he was fine, just tired. Detective Sandoval tracked down the friend who had cared for Isabella on the day Kimberly disappeared. The woman's name was Jennifer Chavez. She had moved to Santa Fe but still remembered that day clearly. She said Kimberly had called her around 9 that morning and asked if she could watch Isabella for a few hours. She said Kimberly sounded upset, like she had been crying. Jennifer asked if everything was okay. Kimberly said yes, she just needed to take care of something. She dropped Isabella off at 9:30 and said she would be back soon. Detective Sandoval asked Jennifer if Kimberly had mentioned where she was going. Jennifer said no, but she said something that made the detective sit up straighter. She said that about an hour after Kimberly left, Marcus had called her. He asked if Kimberly was there. Jennifer said no, she had dropped Isabella off and left. Marcus asked where Kimberly had gone. Jennifer said she didn't know. Marcus said, "If she calls you, tell her to come home, we need to talk." Then he hung up. For those who have noticed the way a story begins to shift when the truth starts leaking through the cracks, this was that shift. Detective Sandoval now had a working theory. She believed that Marcus and Kimberly had argued that morning. She believed that Kimberly had taken Isabella to Jennifer's house to get the little girl out of the situation. She believed that Kimberly had then driven somewhere, perhaps to clear her head, perhaps to meet Marcus and talk things through. And she believed that something had happened during that meeting. Something that ended with Kimberly's car abandoned on State Road 47 and Kimberly herself gone. But she still had no body, no physical evidence, no confession, and Isabella's memories, while compelling, were not enough to bring charges. Detective Sandoval needed more. In early 2013, she decided to interview Marcus Delgado directly. She contacted him through his lawyer and requested a meeting. Marcus agreed. On January 22, 2013, he came to the Valencia County Sheriff's Office with his attorney present. Detective Sandoval asked him to walk through the events of February 14, 2007, one more time. Marcus repeated what he had said before. Kimberly left that morning to go shopping. He went to work. He didn't know where she was. He was worried. When her car was found and she wasn't in it, he was devastated. He said he still hoped she would come home someday. Detective Sandoval asked about the phone call to Jennifer Chavez. Marcus seemed surprised. He said he didn't remember calling Jennifer. His lawyer told him not to answer. Detective Sandoval asked about his lunch break that day. Marcus said he ate lunch at work. In the break room, his lawyer told him not to answer. The interview ended. 2 weeks later, Detective Sandoval received a call from the New Mexico State Police. A hiker had found human remains in a remote area of the Cibola National Forest, approximately 40 miles west of Belen. The remains were skeletal, partially buried, scattered by animals and weather. They were consistent with a female in her early 20s. Dental records confirmed the identity. Kimberly Trujillo. Clears throat. The discovery changed everything. What had been a missing person case was now a homicide investigation. The remains were found in a shallow grave off a dirt access road in the forest. The location was isolated, accessible only by four-wheel drive vehicles. Investigators combed the area for evidence. They found scraps of clothing, a silver necklace that Rosa Trujillo identified as belonging to her daughter, and they found something else: tire tracks. Faint impressions in the hardpan soil, preserved by years of dry weather. The tracks matched the tread pattern of a common tire size, the same size that had been on Marcus Delgado's 1998 Ford F-150. Forensic analysis of the remains was limited due to decomposition, but the medical examiner determined that Kimberly had suffered blunt force trauma to the skull. The injuries were consistent with being struck with a heavy object. The manner of death was ruled a homicide. On March 5, 2013, Detective Sandoval obtained a warrant for the arrest of Marcus Delgado. He was taken into custody at his apartment in Albuquerque without incident. Isabella was placed in the temporary care of Rosa Trujillo. The arrest made headlines across New Mexico. Those who had known Kimberly wept with relief and grief. Those who had doubted Marcus said they had known all along. Those who had believed in his innocence said they were shocked, that he had seemed like a good father, that they couldn't believe he was capable of such a thing. At his arraignment, Marcus Delgado pleaded not guilty. His lawyer argued that the evidence was circumstantial. There were no eyewitnesses, no murder weapon, no forensic evidence directly linking Marcus to the crime scene. The tire tracks could have come from any number of vehicles. Isabella's memories were unreliable. The case, the lawyer said, was built on speculation and grief. But the prosecution had built a timeline that was hard to ignore. They argued that on the morning of February 14, 2007, Marcus and Kimberly had argued. Kimberly had taken Isabella to Jennifer's house and then called Marcus, agreeing to meet him to talk. They met at a remote location off State Road 47. The argument escalated. Marcus struck Kimberly. She died. Marcus panicked. He put her body in his truck and left her car on the side of the highway to make it look like she had disappeared. During his lunch break, he drove her body to the Cibola National Forest and buried it. Then he returned to work. He picked up Isabella from Jennifer's house later that day and said nothing. The prosecution presented phone records showing that Marcus had called Kimberly's cell phone 6 times that morning. They presented testimony from coworkers who said Marcus had seemed agitated and distracted on February 14th. They presented Isabella's testimony, now 11 years old, who told the court in a quiet, steady voice what she remembered. She said, "I remember my daddy telling me to close my eyes. I remember my mommy wasn't there when I opened them. I remember being scared." The trial began in October of 2014. It lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed every day. Rosa Trujillo sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes never leaving Marcus. He sat at the defense table, expressionless, his lawyer whispering in his ear. On November 7, 2014, after 8 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of second-degree homicide. Marcus Delgado showed no reaction. He stared straight ahead. Rosa Trujillo wept. Isabella, sitting beside her grandmother, held her hand tightly. Marcus Delgado was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He is currently incarcerated at the penitentiary of New Mexico in Santa Fe. He has maintained his innocence. He has filed multiple appeals. All have been denied. Isabella Delgado, now a young woman, lives with her grandmother in Los Lunas. She graduated from high school in 2020. She is studying psychology at the University of New Mexico. She has said that she wants to help other children who have experienced trauma, who have lost their mothers, who carry secrets too heavy for their small shoulders. She has said that she thinks about her mother every day, that she wishes she could remember her voice more clearly, that she hopes, wherever her mother is now, she knows that the truth finally came to light. Clears throat. The case of Kimberly Trujillo is a reminder that justice, even when delayed, can still be served. It is a reminder that the voices of children, even when small and uncertain, deserve to be heard. It is a reminder that some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, will eventually rise to the surface. Kimberly was a daughter, a mother, a young woman who deserved to live. Her story did not end the way it should have, but it did not end in silence. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.